Dismissive avoidant, who have no friends or very few friends, are more likely to have these six traits. Dismissive avoidants who move through life with no friends or only one or two distant connections often don't look lonely on the surface. In fact, many of them look composed, independent, even superior in their self-sufficiency. But what's happening internally is far more complex. Friendship, like romantic intimacy, requires emotional availability, consistency, vulnerability, and a tolerance for closeness over time. Four things dismissive avoidants unconsciously associate with danger, loss of control, or emotional exhaustion. When someone repeatedly avoids friendships, it's rarely because they just don't like people. More often, it's because their nervous system learned early on that relying on others was unsafe, disappointing, or pointless. And when that belief becomes deeply ingrained, it doesn't just affect romantic relationships, it shapes personality traits, social behaviors, and even how they see themselves in the world. If a dismissive avoidant has no friends or very few friends, these six traits tend to show up again and again, quietly influencing their life without them fully realizing it. The first trait is emotional self-containment taken to an extreme, where independence isn't just a preference, it becomes an identity. Dismissive avoidants with few or no friends often pride themselves on not needing anyone, but this isn't true independence. It's emotional isolation disguised as strength. They learned early that expressing needs led to rejection, minimization, or neglect. So they adapted by shutting those needs down entirely. Over time, this creates a person who doesn't reach out, doesn't vent, doesn't ask for help, and doesn't share internal struggles, not because they don't have them, but because they no longer recognize them as valid. In friendships, this trait makes connection difficult because closeness requires emotional exchange. Friends bond through shared vulnerability, mutual support, and emotional presence. But the dismissive avoidant keeps everything tightly sealed. They may appear calm, logical, and self-sufficient, yet internally they experience a subtle emptiness or restlessness they can't quite explain. This extreme self-containment often leads them to believe others are unnecessary, when in reality, it's their nervous system protecting them from the discomfort of emotional reliance. The second trait is low tolerance for emotional maintenance, which quietly sabotages friendships before they ever have a chance to deepen. Dismissive avoidants with few friends often perceive relationships as demanding, draining, or inconvenient, especially when emotional availability is required. Checking in, remembering birthdays, responding consistently, or showing up during difficult moments can feel overwhelming to them. Not because it's objectively difficult, but because emotional attunement activates subconscious stress. They may enjoy someone's company in short bursts, especially when things are light, humorous, or surface level, but as soon as a friendship requires effort, empathy, or emotional responsibility, they pull back. This creates a pattern where friendships fade, not due to conflict, but due to neglect. From the outside, it looks like the avoidant is simply busy or private, but over time, people stop reaching out. The dismissive avoidant then interprets this as proof that people are unreliable or friendships don't last, without recognizing their own role in the emotional distance that caused it. The third trait is unconscious superiority masking emotional detachment, where they subtly see themselves as different from or above others. This isn't always arrogance in the obvious sense. It's often quieter and more internal. Dismissive avoidance with few friends may believe others are too emotional, too needy, too dramatic, or too dependent, using these judgments to justify their withdrawal. This mindset protects them from vulnerability by reframing emotional closeness as weakness. If they don't need friends, then losing them doesn't hurt. If others are too much, then emotional distance feels reasonable. But this trait often leaves them disconnected and misunderstood. Deep down, many dismissive avoidants actually long for connection, but their internal narrative tells them that closeness equals compromise, loss of autonomy, or emotional burden. Over time, this subtle superiority becomes a wall, not just between them and others, but between them and their own emotional needs. The fourth trait is difficulty sustaining shared emotional reality, which makes long-term friendships feel unnatural or unstable. Friendships thrive when two people share experiences, memories, emotional rhythms, and a sense of we. Dismissive avoidants, especially those with few friends, struggle with this shared emotional continuity. They often compartmentalize relationships, keeping people in separate mental boxes without deep integration into their lives. This can make them seem inconsistent, warm one moment, distant the next, without explanation. They may disappear for long periods, reappear casually, and expect the connection to resume without addressing the emotional gap. For others, this feels confusing or hurtful, even if no harm was intended. Over time, friends learn not to rely on them emotionally, which slowly erodes closeness. The dismissive avoidant then experiences friendships as shallow or unsatisfying, reinforcing their belief that close bonds aren't worth the effort. The fifth trait is suppressed loneliness paired with denial, where the absence of friendships is rationalized rather than emotionally processed. Many dismissive avoidants genuinely believe they are fine alone, and to some extent, they are. Solitude feels familiar and safe, but beneath that comfort is often a quiet, unacknowledged loneliness that surfaces during moments of stress, illness, or life transitions. Because they've learned to dismiss their own emotional needs, they also dismiss loneliness as irrelevant or weak. Instead of saying, I miss connection, they say people are overrated. Instead of admitting isolation, they frame it as freedom. This denial protects them from pain in the short term, but in the long term, it limits emotional growth. Humans are wired for connection, and when that need is suppressed rather than met, it often shows up indirectly, through irritability, numbness, boredom, or a vague sense of dissatisfaction they can't trace back to its source. The sixth and final trait is avoidance of emotional mirrors, meaning they unconsciously avoid people who might truly see them. Close friendships act as mirrors. They reflect our patterns, our blind spots, and our emotional wounds. For dismissive avoidants, especially those with few friends, being truly seen can feel threatening. It risks exposure, accountability, and emotional intimacy. As a result, they gravitate toward relationships that stay functional, transactional, or surface level. Work connections, activity-based acquaintances, or situational friendships that don't require emotional depth. This allows them to maintain control and avoid self-reflection, but it also prevents healing. Without emotional mirrors, dismissive avoidants rarely confront the origins of their attachment patterns, and so those patterns quietly repeat, affecting not just friendships, but romantic relationships, family dynamics, and their overall sense of fulfillment. In the end, dismissive avoidants who have no friends or very few friends aren't broken, cold, or incapable of connection. They are adapted. Their traits were once survival strategies that helped them navigate emotional neglect, inconsistency, or early relational wounds. But what protected them then may limit them now. Awareness is the turning point. When a dismissive avoidant begins to recognize these traits, not with shame, but with curiosity, they open the door to a different kind of strength. Not the strength of emotional isolation, but the strength of selective connection. Because true independence isn't about needing no one, it's about choosing connection without losing yourself. And that's a skill that can be learned slowly, safely, and on their own terms.